Our guest has arrived after doing that whole about turn. He's here. George Njoroge is the CEO of East Africa Data Handlers. Good morning, George.
Morning to you. How are you?
Very well, thanks. Thank you very much for joining us
Thank
in
you for
Kenya's
having me.
biggest conversation. Welcome, occupying the hot seats. Make yourself comfortable. What happened again on the road? Just for everybody to understand this.
I think some of us who are not used to the exit way, some don't get the idea that where the exit points are. And I think if you don't cue it in your head exactly where you need to exit, I mean, you'll be forced to go to airport like I was, then turn back, then at least try and get your way back into the whole thing.
So you went all the way to the airport.
And then turned back.
And then turned back.
And then came back again.
Went all the way to Airtel.
Yes.
Southern Bypass.
Then came
came down again. Karibu. You're here.
Asante sana.
And thank you for joining us.
Asante.
Who is East Africa Data Handlers?
Well, we are a specialty data house. I think we specialize in digital solutions. But largely, a lot of what we do is what is considered cybersecurity. Any of some of the most problematic cases you found that required forensic experts to come in, we've largely been involved. So you think of any case that went to court and required an expert who would speak on it digitally, then we are the guys who came on board on that basis.
So cybersecurity.
Yes.
And when you say data handling, you have to ask yourself, what does that mean?
I mean, we do business continuity solutions. So we try and look at the business and see how well do we make it continue. But primarily, we have skewed ourselves to where the new age crime is seated. Hackings that affect businesses, that affect countries and all, is where we've largely been involved. And trying to decipher the bigger problem is, how did it happen? How do we avoid it? And if we, for instance, have been hacked, or the new age crime of like ransomware, how do we ensure that we are not ransomed? So ransomware is where, for instance, somebody comes in, locks your entire files, puts a password on it, and calls and says,
On your own machine.
On your own machine.
Which is in your own office or home.
Which is exactly what you put even in your own iPad or laptop. And then says, bro, you better pay me maybe $1,000 or $10,000 and send it on Bitcoin or whatever crypto they would like to be paid in. And then I'll give you the key. Otherwise, you'll not be helped.
Have we seen such cases in Kenya?
A lot.
We read about such cases internationally in Kenya.
You're saying reading. We see movies.
Yes, we actually see movies about such things.
Well, I think
Does it happen in Kenya?
A lot. I mean, our data handlers, we find ourselves handling these kind of things maybe every month. There's always a huge entity that has been hit. Every other day, some of us are hit, but entities that are sizable enough have these kind of problems. And largely because we are a human entity-run business. So one of our brothers in the entire setup likes watching maybe porn or clicks into a thing or two that necessarily leads them to a place where they open a door and then hackers get access to their machine. And
so when you come in as data handlers, what do you do?
Well, we
do negotiate on their behalf.
I wish we can do that. I like that. No, we have better ways of negotiating. So we'll decrypt the entire data for them, and we will pick that and decrypted data, and we will use it and have them use it normally.
When you say decrypt, what do you mean?
I mean, I pick what was locked and has a password on it, and we remove our very password and we allow you to use it normally like you had before.
Okay.
So you hack the hacker's password?
Yes, we do.
Okay, so how then do you prevent such an individual from coming into this same harm yet again?
That's exactly now what data handlers now comes into. There's something called vulnerability and penetration testing. We'll come always and check how vulnerable are you, how penetrable you are, and if somebody can penetrate you, then check how likely you are to be penetrated, and then align you towards fixing those issues.
Okay.
Yes.
Now, what are the things that make you vulnerable?
Well, the biggest thing that makes you vulnerable is humans. We are reckless in nature. Your password, I guess, is your last name, the nickname your mother liked calling you, your child's favorite child's name. Those are things that we are consistent on that.
Things you can remember easily.
Things that you will, and then that password is consistently across everything: your Facebook, your Instagram, your bank account, online banking. I mean, it's you get one and you have the whole thing, and the only thing you add is a 01, 05 or 2022 at the end. You ask, let's poll here.
See, he's a bit worried because that's exactly what his password is right now.
No.
So he's thinking, oh God, I have to change this. in about a minute.
What I have is his favorite dog, and he didn't mention that, so I'm quite safe.
I mean, these are the normal passwords. I mean, they are our pets, our wives, our girlfriend names, everything that we want to.
Brother, you had to put wives after pets.
Followed by girlfriends.
And
No
then
less.
Girlfriends. Okay. All right.
Talking about elections, because that's the conversation that we'd like to have with you today.
Yes.
Is we have technology being deployed in our elections.
Yes.
Okay. All the 22 million plus registered voters, their details are with the IEBC, collected electronically, biometric data.
Yes.
Then this register is now being broken down into polling stations
Yes.
across the 46,232 polling stations,
Yes.
right? Which means that if you want to go into any police station, you'll find the people who are registered there into this one Kim's kit. Then the data will be transmitted. And then there'll be all these accusations of, there's a midway server somewhere that is receiving and then playing games
Yes.
and then retransmitting.
Yeah.
Now, do you have a role to play as data handlers in protecting such systems?
Well, we help the players involved in the game understand what has happened. In the 2017 elections, I was at the Supreme Court, and at the time I was consulting for Jubilee Party, and my role was to try and understand and decipher exactly what happened. Our biggest opportunity, I think, as a people, is to embrace technology, but it's also to understand the risks that comes with technology. Our opportunity is to embrace and take it up and then see how best do we use the technology to advance the resources and the opportunities that comes with election. We have a very complex solution that's going to be implemented. We have one singular database that about 20-something million people that is going to be broken down in, you're going to run 46,000 queries. So just simple instructions that says split this into small databases based on location. So if there's a location called Mombasa Road, split it. Everybody that falls on that, you split it. Then within that small database that has been created called Mombasa Road, split them into chunks of 700, of 1 into 700, and then you make them into polling centers, then polling stations. So that's exactly the task that they currently have. Then pick that entire data, put it in small flash drives, put them on the Kim's kit. Now hope and anticipate that guys will come in and everybody will be identified on the D-Day. On the D-Day, once you're identified, create another small database of everybody who has voted.
Everybody who has actually turned up.
Everybody who's turned up, yes. So once you're identified successfully, they'll create a micro file that technically has everybody who was identified. Then at the end of the day, take the form 34A, fill it up based on the numbers that are being counted at the polling center, at the polling station. Then take a photo, use that Kim's key to transmit the elections. That is the nature of the complexity that we have. Now I want you to look at it this simply. You have 46,200 images that are coming into one server.
Is it occurring in real time? IEBC is saying that this is not going to be...
No. The querying is being done early.
It's the result.
It's an offline.
Okay.
So remember now, at the end of the day, you'll have 46,000 results being transmitted
Into
in an
one.
image into one center, and expect that singular center to analyze it, pick it up, and run with it. So it's a humongous task that is quite complex, and I pray that there is enough capability to make it happen.
Is there?
Well,
Because I think that's not just from anybody who's sitting listening right now, even those who are the participants in the election.
Yes.
And I'm not just talking about those who go to vote, those who are, rallying around this equipment to make sure that it works. And that could have been the fear that then is being addressed today, that even as you've mentioned, expecting this one piece of equipment to be able to do all of that, not break down, deliver the results as expected. Can it? Very simply. Will it? Can it?
well, it is a problem. The simulations have failed, and that's a point of concern. All this entire election would be pegged on technology. The credibility, the success of it is pegged on technology. The biggest risk we have, for instance, is some of the things we have pointed out to IBC. Number one is a KIMS kit. You have 46,000 KIMS kit being sent out. They've said they have extra KIMS kit for each and every polling station. The requirement, what has been pushed by the political parties, is that let every KIMS kit be singularly isolated for a particular polling station, where it's geolocked to that particular station. They initially had said it is geolocked. It is not the case. What is geolocked is a singular database. So you can remove that flash drive, put it the one for Kibwezi if you are in Nakuru, put the one for Kibwezi and it will work.
Wait, the flash drive is the one that is geolocked, right?
It is not
So we
geo-
have a kit. We have something, that thing where you go and put your finger,
Yes.
right? This is the kit. And then this one accepts a flash drive.
Yes.
And the flash drive is what is containing the data.
Yes.
This is just a device.
Yes.
Okay. So you're saying that the device is not locked to this particular polling station.
That's exactly where the
This
problem
device can be removed from here and be taken to Kibwezi, like you've said.
Yeah.
But can the flash drive be taken to Kibwezi?
Well,
It can.
It can, yes.
But it will only have the information of Mombasa Road polling station.
yes.
Okay.
And that's
So
where the problem is.
where is the problem?
Because that means that, for instance, tomorrow morning I'll wake up and create my polling data, come with a KIMS kit, and presupposed to identify voters.
Is it that you will duplicate what already exists, or will you have knowledge of what exists so that you create something similar?
You will have knowledge of what exists and they create something similar.
You're saying very scary things.
Scary thing.
Yeah, do you understand that?
No, it's not that scary, but tell us why you feel it's scary.
Do you know? Did you hear what he just said?
Yes, I did.
That it's possible for you to have this data and you can actually go and replicate it. If you
Yes.
can replicate it, it also means that you can create new data.
Yes.
That's
My
exactly
question
what the
is,
problem
how do you get access to this data?
Yes.
I thought that is where the IBC has secured
Yeah.
this data.
There was
the
a-
22 million voters, that is secured. Or does anybody have access to this database of 22 million?
Well, there was allegation that 4,000 KIMS kit were lost.
Quisha.
So if there are 4,000 KIMS
Whoa.
kit missing, then you have flash drive that contains whatever information you want to put on it. It means you will identify anybody. Let me tell you another problem. The original supplier of this KIMS kit that we currently are going to use in the next 30 days or less is a company called Idemia. They didn't win the tender for this election. The new supplier of KIMS kit is called Seismatic. Semantic or Seismatic. That's a word.
Systematic.
Now, it means one manufacturer. This is Pioneer. We remove Pioneer, manufacturer of this equipment. We say, oh, we have a new guy called Mika. He's going to be supporting this equipment. How do we remove the data from the Pioneer
To Mika.
to Mika? And get it, the data will remain on the same KIMS kit hardware, but it will require to operate on the software of Mika. How do you make it work?
Is,
So
it,
the-
is
the
it
tr-
impossible?
The transition between the old service provider and the migration of that entire data has been put to question, where that data was originally encrypted. What is that the original supplier was never paid. So he never provided the encryption keys to decipher the data that they were locked, because he had locked the data. So what happened? The migration, the IBC says they migrated the data. The question is, was the migration successful? And did it mean that your voter identification data, so it means your ID, your fingerprints, migrated successfully into the new infrastructure? That has not been tested. So you have only verified you're in the
Hasn't
mobile
been tested by who?
by the individual voters. I mean, my fingerprint can only be tested by me.
Yes.
So
To
if
see
you
if it correlates with what is supposedly in the system.
so does it purely identify me as the actual voter that fingerprint belongs to?
And is it possible to pilot the working capacity or the veracity of this equipment before the actual process of voting? Or are we waiting for the actual day of voting?
In the 2017 election, 2.5 million voters were not identified with the KIMS kit.
Yes.
That at that point, the supplier of the software, the supplier of the hardware was the same. In this time, the supplier of the software is one, the supplier of the hardware is a different component.
And where's the benefit?
I mean, it creates a problem.
Yes, that's why, because I'm wondering.
There was a fallout between.
I even understand the
commission
fallout,
and
but
the supplier.
I was thinking more of compatibility. Okay? And how it is that someone who's applied both soft and hard, the software and the hardware, and yet there was a problem. Is
Now,
it?
what happens with one who has supplied the software and has not supplied the hardware? What kind of problem do you anticipate?
Yeah.
But these things happen all the time.
No.
Bwana.
In an election such as this one here, it isn't a problem that has happened.
Banks migrate from one system to another. KRA migrates from one system to another.
They
We've
do.
seen this.
They do.
Eh?
They do. But in a case like this, I'm not talking about that of just compatibility. No. I'm talking about the deliberateness. Because how do you have a situation when you have a sensitive matter like that of an election, and suddenly we're dealing with problems that can easily be resolved? We're not discussing something that is extremely... No, there's nothing hard about this. The technology we're talking about, we're not inventing it. It exists.
Yes.
It has worked elsewhere.
Yes. It has even worked here.
And there are people who know exactly what to do with it. So the moment I hear software, one other person, hardware, one other person, compatibility, bit of an issue, to me, this is deliberate.
I've got very many questions to ask you, George. Because here you are raising concern and casting some shadow of doubt on the credibility of even the suppliers.
But no, I'm trying to tell you the problems that we have. Let me give you another problem.
Take a break. Okay? There's enough problems up to 33 minutes after 7. Let's take another break. 27 minutes to 8. Kenya's biggest conversation takes this break.
This is the Situation Room, the only way to start your day.
It continues. This hour, our guest is George Njoroge. He is the CEO of East Africa Data Handlers. We're talking about technology in this year's general election. Before that, George, you passed by the expressway entrance in Westlands, and you saw this accident.
Yeah, it's really bad. I think it got me very worried. There's a matatu that has overturned. A few people lying on the road. Not sure of their status, and I think got me very worried. Why there's all these accidents at the entry points, both at
Mlolongo now in Westlands.
Yeah.
These are big stations. I mean, you see this station from very far.
Yes.
However, even as you talk about approaching the Westlands entry into the expressway, you come in there 4 lanes.
Yes.
And then suddenly the 2 lanes
they condense
are
into
taking you into the expressway, and
Yeah.
the other 2 are the ones that are bringing you onto the lower road.
Yeah.
So we've seen very many cases where, in fact, I've been driving on that road, and you have to remind yourself, keep left.
Yes.
If you don't want to enter the expressway. If you're on the right,
Not just keep, stay left.
stay left. If you're on the right, you will find yourself entering and you'll be like, "Sasa inaenda wapi
If you
mimi?"
make that mistake and then you suddenly want to turn, and remember there's an incline.
Yes. And the other vehicles on the
Yes,
other lanes.
if you suddenly turn, it is not difficult to see how
You flip over.
you'll flip.
Yep.
Certainly.
Yep, that's true. Matatu drivers, though, they ply this route on a daily basis. This particular Matatu company, the one that we're seeing in the photos, I mean, plies this route on a daily basis. So it's not like the crew wouldn't know, unless we're talking about a new member of crew.
Human error. Just call it human error, because strange things happen on the road.
Indeed.
And if you're heading towards Machakos, it's even stranger in the evening.
I think it's a state of mind that you start working. I think if, for instance, he had issues at home and walks out to the road.
Yeah.
You never know, man.
Things that you carry into the driver's seat.
Maybe you didn't even rest adequately, and you started work probably at 4 in the morning.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're not all there. You haven't eaten anything. Yes. You may be driving on a road you're familiar with, but it is very easy for the mind to drift.
It's
You are-
unfortunate.
You are not fully fed last night.
Yes.
We'll keep you updated on what's happening on that road as we continue with the show. George, you are raising hairs here with the questions that you're asking regarding the credibility of technology to be deployed in this year's election. Okay? So, a number of things that you've said. Number one is we have the KIMS kit. KIMS kit is the Kenya Electronic Integrated Electro Management System.
Yes.
KIEMS. Recognized in law, we shall have our database of voters, electronic. We shall identify our voters electronically. We shall transmit the presidential result electronically. Questions you're raising here are with regards to the hardware and software and compatibility since the last election and updating this database of voters into this election.
Yes.
There was an audit that was done by a reputable audit company. It did not raise this question.
Well, I think if they never looked at it from a technology perspective, then it really doesn't add up. I mean, KPMG, I presume, are largely account auditors. So they would provide you books of accounts. I do know that they do forensic work. The veracity of their work, I may not speak to it. But, I mean, these are concerns that would be there. The bigger concern for me is COVID. COVID brought a myriad of problems globally. It forced the shutdown and closure of businesses. And some of the businesses were closed down are factories that manufacture chipsets. What are chipsets? These are small microprocessors that run everything that is electronic in this world. Now, the closure of this factory forced manufacturers of virtually many items, fridges, cookers, computers, and all, to cut down the production. Because, I mean, the microprocessor is a critical component in the entire production process of processing anything that will process this unit and everything else. So what happened to the production of specialized servers and computers globally? That was cut off. So does IBC have new servers? The backlog to order
Do they
a
need
new
servers?
They need it. Technology in itself has a lifespan of 3 years. Most hardwares. I mean, within 3 years, you will need to replace this. You'll need to replace this screen and all. So the technology will evolve. So the evolved technology means that within 5 years, which means the technology they currently have will be 5-6 years, would need to have been replaced. And the orders of technology globally have been a nightmare. Trying to get in equipment into the countries has been a problem. So that means that the order for any specialized equipment that would be required to run an election like ours will be high-end servers, will be high-end processing machines, will be high-end storage infrastructure that would run this is not feasibly, you're not feasibly able to do them. By the January of this year, no particular new hardware had been delivered. I know they had a procurement that has not been delivered. So it tells you that even as we stand right now, there's a plausibility that those hardwares have not been commissioned and or installed.
But they're working.
I mean, what is there is work is old, but old is not gold. When
But
it
it's
comes to
working.
technology.
With 32 days to the election, George, the server that is holding our election
1,000 images.
It'll
being
have
sent to it.
It'll have more images than everything that it's storing will be more than what we had before.
Will be quadrupled.
Precisely. Now, does it have the capacity for that?
That's a question that
When we bought it, did we not buy it with the specifications and the numbers of the election that we had 5 years ago?
yes.
So we are querying and saying, now with this election and with the increased numbers, is it able to actually do the job that it's being asked, which is being asked of it?
It can do, it may fail.
If we had equipment that catered for these needs, would we be saying the same thing? It could work, it may fail. It's technology after all.
Yes.
But, there's a but.
Yes.
So you're the expert.
What's your bet?
No, there's need for clarity. In a situation such as this one here, because this is now what you call a conundrum, what then should one do? What should we do?
I mean, borrow technology from existing government. I mean, the entire infrastructure within government are things that we would admit and say, for instance, we don't have this storage, we need more storage. Let's talk to KRA, let's talk to Kengen, let's talk to a few parastatals, see, are you guys able to give us storage for us to be able to accommodate this need?
Now, when you start borrowing and leasing storage, there's a question of data protection.
I mean,
Yes.
when push comes to shove, I mean, you have to try and get things moving.
I understand perfectly. We might as well even talk to banks and ask them to also store some of this information because they also have. But it's true, they have some
servers.
capacity. They have servers,
they
yes.
do, yes.
But I am saying it makes sense. However, the question of the protection, the question of the confidentiality that is required, is it guaranteed?
I don't know. Maybe, I have no idea, but nationalize one or two things. Pick a bank, nationalize it, take your servers and use it. I don't know whether you would.
Why nationalized? Why don't you just use the central bank? Because central bank, well, if you're talking about an institution that has a serious server that can do all sorts of things, central bank, in my mind, would be.
You would assume that the central bank would have a serious.
Oh yes,
can do very many
not
things.
assume. It must have, given the work that it does. It must have.
All the money it keeps for us.
George, have I got this wrong? No, George isn't going to answer that question.
George, I mean, look, I mean, some of the things that we are talking about here, I mean, this is potentially serious stuff here.
Yes.
Because if we're talking about a system upon which responsibility of delivering the results of an election, quadrupling in terms of the numbers that we saw in 2017, and we're putting a large amount of responsibility on the shoulders of equipment. And what you're saying essentially is that there's a maybe it would, maybe it wouldn't kind of situation with it being able to hold all of this together. Now, even as you say that, it's a fear, it's a concern that's being raised. The vanguards of this system, being the IEBC, do they know this?
I mean, they would understand it. The question is expecting that the technology will suddenly live up to the commitment.
Or hoping that it actually would and that we don't have to do anything, complementary.
The example is a failed simulation that happened a few weeks back, and which should have been a clarion call to say, guys, we have a small problem.
Okay.
I think we can fix it if we are able to open up and agree how to.
Allow me to interject
the
here.
simulation?
For this simulation that failed, I mean, we didn't really pay attention to it publicly.
It didn't fail.
So what exactly
There were
happened with
challenges.
this simulation?
Come on, George.
Are you being...
I'm not. You see, let me tell you, we have 1,111 polling stations that will not have connectivity at the D-Day. How are we going to connect to them?
What percentage of these polling stations that don't have connectivity, what percentage are they of the total number?
Do a simple math. Assuming each of these have one stream, so these are polling centers, 1,100. Each stream has about 700 people. So 1,111 is 770.
Thousand, yes.
So that's 700,000 people that you will not be able to transmit their data. On average, them having at least 700 people is impossible. So you'll at least have 1, 2, or 3. If we take 3 as a basic number for every polling center, to have 3 polling stations, you'll have 2.5 million people in all these centers. It's a big
But
number.
these are the people, these are the centers that will not have 3G or 4G access.
Yes.
IBC has said we want to identify the specific centers and then we will deploy satellite technology to transmit. That either way, these polling centers will transmit. They may not use the 3G or 4G technology of the telcos, but they'll use satellite.
Now, question is, which are these centers and why are they not being gazetted? If they are well known, where is the information about these centers? Because the question is,
I've got to say, I had a conversation yesterday with the IBC CEO and vice chairperson and a commissioner. And this question, we actually discussed it. So the IBC says that they have asked for this information from the
CAK.
Yes, the Communications Authority. Communications Authority is going to give them the data. IBC will then geolocate each of these affected polling centers, and then they'll be able to now do the next things. Announce to the public, gazette, and say these ones don't have access to 3G, 4G, and this is what we are going to do to address the challenge.
How long are we saying to set up 1,000 points, 1,000 points of satellite setups? I mean, you let me know how long it takes you to set up at the airport, asking the guys at the airport your Wi-Fi password. Now tell me how long it will take you to set up 1,000 points, and we have less than about 25 days?
33 days to be precise.
33 days. So
Yes.
give me a number of how long it will take to set up each point and how many technicians you need to set up these points.
You were involved in the 2017 election.
Yes.
So some of these questions that you're asking, you've dealt with before. Okay? In 2017, some polling stations were not able to transmit via 3G, 4G.
Yes.
They used satellite. Was there a challenge with satellite transmission?
There was, yes. And most of that data, some of it never arrived. And
Why?
I mean, I may not tell.
Eric, ilienda kwa satellite.
Ikakaa juu,
Haikurudi.
ilienda kwa mwezi.
You know, we need Joe to come back again. I'm saying this early because in my mind, this discussion has only just begun. Because the issues that we are discussing here get to the very heart of authenticating the validity of this particular election that we're going to talk about.
Sure.
Because if there is a doubt, even the slightest of these doubts on this process, then the process is already flawed even before we begin.
Sure.
But I also get a sense, and I've got to ask you this question directly, George. Very many of these questions that you're raising as a data expert, right, are questions that your contemporaries who work for the IABC and elsewhere have also raised and they're discussing.
Yes.
Have you had a conversation with them? Have you, let's say, even advised your friends who may be in political campaigns, ask these questions, and what kind of answers are they receiving from IABC?
Well, we've asked, we have raised, and I think their concerns are exactly the same. The good thing about technology, Iman, it's the preparedness of any tool, your machine to work, I mean, is something that you can predict. The possibility of what you need to execute specific things is normally very clear. Unlike situations where you certainly have no visibility of any possible failure that you may not anticipate, preparedness of technology can be certain. When you're certain that this equipment will work tomorrow morning, as long as it's connected and mic'd up to the very point that it works. That's exactly how technology is. If you are certain and you have stress test technology, then technology will always never fail. But when there are certain glaring pointers that require to be addressed and they are ignored or they're perpetually found to be flawed, then suddenly you're walking into a crisis that will suddenly happen.
What happened? What challenges were experienced with this simulation that happened a few weeks ago? What happened and what should have been done or what is being done currently to work on those issues?
Well, IEBC has committed to having another simulation maybe in another week or so. But what happened at the time was that none of the data, I think most of the polling centers that were picked were not able to successfully transmit their data 4 or 5 hours into the presupposed time they did send their data. And that in itself was a question. Are we ready? And have we simulated this? And this, we're talking about 1,000 points. So when we are talking about 46,000 points, we will have crisis of inflow of data. And what happens is when there's significant inflow of data into an infrastructure, the server may most potentially shut down because it will presume it's a DDoS, so denial of service. So there's a lot of services that are being demanded of the server, and it will not be able to perform at its optimum. And what will happen is that a lot of data will get stuck either in delivery or transmission process, and that in itself will create a problem. Have we received data? Are we going to receive it again? Does the server keep receiving the same information numerous times? And how does it protect and ensure that whatever is being received is being understood? The other challenge is, for instance, you will receive 46,000 images. How do you read them?
Sure.
There's something called OCR where you be able to read the image and be able to transcribe whatever is visibly there into text format for aggregation. Now, if we don't have technology to do that, which they currently don't have, it means that somebody else will still have to come and see what is there, type it out, and the element of human error will suddenly come in. And because I didn't understand the RO's handwriting that took the photo, and maybe they shook at the time they were taking a photo, they were under too much stress, it's a public setup, it's a big dark, you may not have clear visibility of this picture. So it means at the end of the day, understanding this is critical. The other challenge, for instance, is on the D-Day of the election. One of the problems that you find is that nobody has an idea of how many people voted in terms of the ballot papers. And what happens is that the remainder of the ballot papers are normally put back on the ballot box and it's sealed. And until a court order is issued for the opening of the ballot box, you will not know how many ballot papers remained. If they were to digitize the ballot paper process and be able to ensure that the returns of the ballot paper are put on the voting diary, it would make it possible for, even without a court order, to have access to the information of saying, we had 200,000 ballot papers received in our center. 200 people turned out. So we have a remainder of 5. And because it's digitized, the system will just pick that data and transmit, so that as they are transmitting results, they are transmitting the results plus the return of the ballot paper data that will make it easy. So you necessarily do not need a court order unless you need to verify this information at whatever point.
George, we thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you.
And like CT said, especially when the IEBC conducts its second simulation,
Yes.
let's continue having these conversations.
Sure.
Let's keep raising the questions that ought to be raised. Let's
Yes.
make sure that all of us understand the process.
Sure.
George Njoroge is the CEO of the East Africa Data Handlers. He's been here with us telling us about use of technology in this year's general election. Are we prepared? Do we understand the technology? Is the IEBC well kitted to work the technology that they have?